So Cheryl Hart, it is awesome to have you on here again. And just it was really awesome because following yours, I got just a great response from a lot of different people,
Mm.
and people came to me saying, "Hey, she talked about resiliency being a skill set, and what are some of those? What are some of those skills? It'd be helpful to name those and kind of talk through those a little bit more, and
Okay.
then." Geez, weeks, months passed actually, and I had more people. Gosh, I just listened to that podcast with Cheryl Hart on there, and man, she did such a fantastic job, and it helped me through a few things. So here we are today, and so wanted to talk about normalizing emotions for our kiddos and for parents, and as they are kind of disseminating this information to their kids and how their kids are receiving it and just walking kids through there. So, um, yeah, and part of that will be talking about emotional resiliency and the skills attached to those and how we can change the culture and things like that. But I thought it would be good today. A couple weeks ago, I have not released this podcast, but I spoke with a consultant in neurobiology, and she was talking about the amygdala and prefrontal cortex. And um, how do you refer to the amygdala and prefrontal cortex so that it's easy, a little bit more accessible to us that don't know a lot about it?
No, I was saying so much in that, and I still can't remember those words right. And so I can't remember amygdala, cortex, blah, blah, blah. So some of my teachers use the term lizard brain and logic brain.
Okay.
And totally different. Here's how I was trained. And I'm not a neurobiologist, so like listen to them if they say something different. But I was trained that across the course of human evolution, that certain things evolved, and then on top of that, other things evolved. But we've got some of the older nervous system models on board all at the same time. I mean, there's a whole book about this. Um, but lizard brain is the most primitive, and I was taught that the reason we call it lizard brain is if you take a lizard's nervous system out, if you cut it out and like lay it on the table, then you take a human's a certain portion, the fight or flight, the survival mechanism of the nervous system, portion of the nervous system devoted to survival. If you take that out and lay it next to the lizard, my teacher's like, it looks the same. Just the humans is bigger, but the lizard's is smaller. So we call that one the lizard brain. It's up under, it's on the brain stem. It's not the fancy stuff up top. It's very primitive stuff. It involves survival and fight or flight, and it's super fast because that's what helps you survive when a bear's coming at you full speed. You want the fastest part of your brain handling survival, and so it's really great for that. Of course, it's not very bright. Lizards, Marty, lizards aren't smart, right?
Sure. Yep.
They jump to the wrong conclusion. They get ideas in their head, and they go off out in left field. Lizards aren't smart. But what is smart is the logic part of your brain, this fancy pants, gray matter stuff up on top.
Okay.
That's like the peak of evolution. I mean, that's why we kind of dominate the planet, is because we have this fancy logic part of our brain that does planning, organizing, putting things, triaging, making decisions about what needs to go first, what needs to go last, all kinds of problem solving and very nuanced, high level analytical thought takes place up here in the top. But lizard brain's faster because it helps you survive, and it's helped us survive since the beginning. I mean, since back into the lizard part of evolution. So it's been around a long time, right? So it's lizards always going to get there first. The emotions, the bad conclusions, the black and white thinking, the jump to conclusions kind of thinking will always get there first. But forget the exact number. I think it's about 700ths of a second later, 700,000ths of it. It's just a smidgen of a second later. The logic brain arrives. I don't remember the exact number. It's extremely small. Logic brain that train will pull into the station, and then it's thinking, and it's like, what's going on here? Let me look at the big picture. Like, what's the real story? Like that part of your brain kicks in. But if we don't know that there's two parts of our brain coming to the party to solve the problem, we're just going to go with the first one that arrives, which is lizard, right? And we get mad and we jump to conclusions and we say things we shouldn't say, and we fight when our lizard. Usually, when we're fighting, our lizard brain has taken over the steering wheel and is running the show. And it's the dumbest part of us. It's the dumbest part of us, Marty. And it's trying to we're trying to solve conflict with the dumbest part of us. It's anyway, lizard
Eh,
logic. I don't know about amygdala and all that, but lizard and logic we know.
Okay. And if I'm not mistaken, so you said it's the first thing. So all information is filtered first through that, correct?
I don't know about filtering it first through that. I don't know that
Okay.
it's the filter. But when we are getting stimuli coming in from our environment, we're seeing something run towards us. That analytical process, is this threat, or is this support life or attack life? Is this gonna get me or help me or hurt me? Like that, the part of your brain that makes those assessments down in the brainstem is going to be faster than the part of you up top that sees the big picture and understands. When your wife says something and you're like, what is, and then the claws come out, right? But if
Right.
you step back and oh, this is her history, like she's got a thing because of the family she grew up in, she's prone to say things like this. Like that's the logic part of your brain up top, right? This guy is going to arrive first before the logic part arrives.
Oh yeah, it totally. Yeah, definitely makes sense. And people who are, who have traumas in their life, or they don't have those good processing skills, they stay in that spot a little bit longer, correct?
My understanding is the way I look at it is that it's almost like we have shock absorbers, right? Shock absorbers in the car. You
Yep.
can go through potholes and you can, it'll keep things steady. But each time you go through a trauma, or if you go through a trauma that's really bad, it'll eat your shock absorbers, right? And your
Mm,
shock absorbers um, keep this closer to the front and keep this more under control,
got
right?
it.
So your lizard brain is more under control the more shock absorbers you have, and the more trauma you've been exposed to, the less and less and less. It's called resiliency is another way to look at it. The less resiliency you have, the less you can tolerate the stimuli coming in. And then you're more reactive. You're prone to having this guy, the lizard brain, react immediately, right? And jump to the wrong conclusions. Like, she just said that to hurt me. She's out to get me. And, your lizard will really go for it and interpret things that are threats that aren't threats at all, right? It'll overinterpret threat because that's its job, to focus on threats. And if it's not regulated by logic, it can get really out of hand. So some people have been so traumatized that they're always in that state of mind, right? Or the least little thing, the threshold, the fuse for that is really, really short.
Yeah,
And
and that is something that we can manage through therapy and through coaching and things like that, correct?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, that isn't that the point of therapy is we neutralize the reasons that fuse got short in the first place, and we learn a bunch of tools and tactics to lengthen that fuse and to reinstall your shock absorbers so that whatever's coming at you, it has less of an impact, and whatever's coming at you, your logic brain can respond to it and doesn't get completely taken over by lizard
Yeah.
brain response.
Yeah. Um, so what I'm hearing, and tell me if there's other things too, but what I'm hearing is that the importance in knowing and understanding that lizard logic brain is so that we can say, hey, there is a part of us that is very reactive,
Yeah.
and then there's a part of us that allows us to have a response that is controlled and calculated and thoughtful, and also can just take a step back and pause and engage in a more logical way. Is that
I think that's spot on.
okay?
And I think, I got old. I remember back from when I was young, and this was in the dinosaur age, when people get mad, what's the only recommendation you ever heard in your childhood? Count to 10. Stop, count to
Yeah.
10. right? Like that's not going to solve the problem most of the time, but I think they were on the right path. They're like stopping the or before you respond, you're allowing your lizard brain response comes first. You're counting to 10. That allows time for your logic brain to catch up. And then ideally, you'll have a greater perspective at the end of that count.
Yes. So, so now we have a little bit of an understanding of our brain, that kind of that foundation, um,
Mm-hmm.
and that now we can start to move forward into, you know, how start to change that culture, and noticing feelings and understanding that's our kind of our first gut reaction. I mean, I'm 40. I just turned 45,
Oh,
and
happy
I
birthday.
know I thank you, and I know that I still snap. You know, I still take things the wrong way. You know, some of that is part of where I came from. Some of that is part of how I have, from that spot, just my normal processes. And then now I'm starting to realize, hey, okay, somebody comes at me with something that kind of pushes me back against the wall. I don't have to respond right away.
Mm-hmm.
I can take a deep breath. I can start to push through that. So yeah, kind of walk us through like how do we begin to change that culture?
Well, I think I have to say, Marty, like I know all this stuff. I've been teaching it forever, and my lizard brain's very active, right? And
Sure.
it can come if I feel like something's coming at me. My lizard's like, hi. So I think we're wired for it. I don't think we're wired for it. I know we're wired for it because the neuro research has taught us that this is wiring in the brain. And I think that's the first thing to realize, that the fight or flight response is wiring and emotions are wiring. There's been some work, and at this moment, I can't remember that dude's name. Um, Probably remember it the moment we stopped recording. But there's a researcher who has really established that there are actual brain parts and brain pathways that are assigned to different emotions.
Mm,
It's almost like color. There's primary colors, and from the primary colors, you blend at different ratios, and you get all the other colors. It's almost like that for emotions. And we have these parts. I think five or six. I don't remember exactly right now. There's five or six. Oh, you there?
yep.
There's five or six different base models, and then you blend them and you get all the different emotions. And so that's something that I think is really important to bear in mind, is this fight or flight response hardwired in our neurology, in our brain. You're human, you got this, unless you have a wiring problem. And the emotions are also part of our wiring. They're part of our biology, which to me tells me that if it's literally part of our base model, our makeup, it can't be bad, it can't be wrong. It's just, this is part of humanity, right? And I
Yeah.
don't know what your family was like growing up, but I know what my family was like, and I hear about the family stories of all my clients, and I haven't heard too many stories or seen too many examples of families that don't stigmatize emotions and stigmatize feeling them, showing them, talking about them. And then what the net effect, the downstream effect of that is, you get people who have never talked about them. It's never been cool to talk about them. So they haven't invested any time or energy into focusing on them, even though they're happening all the time because we're hardwired for them. They're happening. And then we have to work on hiding them and pretending they're not happening and drinking them away and porn using them, sex addictioning them away, like all these tactics and tools to make the feelings go away. Wouldn't it be nice if we were raised in a family that acknowledged, yeah, this happens, feelings happen, and just like hunger happens, just like tiredness happens, feelings happen. Your family teaches you about eating and how to eat and when to eat, and they teach you about bedtimes and how to handle sleep. If you need a rest, take a rest. But not too many families, at least up until now in history, spend a lot of time on emotion management, and that's what I think would be helpful for children. If my adult patients, I only see adults. I don't see children. So we got to bear that in mind on my recommendations. But if my adult patients as children were taught that emotions are normal and here's what you do when you get mad, here's what you do when you get spun up and your lizard brain takes control, I don't know that they would. I don't know that they would need me if they had a basic skill set that taught them how to handle the reality of emotions. So I think if you're going to help children, you got to change the culture of the family around emotions.
Yeah, and when I hear you say emotion management, y- um, I think a lot of times, especially, and it truly, especially as men, it's saying I can, by managing it, it's, oh, I've got an emotion, I'm going to manage it by putting it over here and out of mind, right? But
Yeah, pretending
but
it's not there.
pretending it's not there, but um, it can be as simple as, man, I am ticked off right now, and
Yeah,
I could either take this glass that's in my hand and throw it off the wall, or I can walk outside into our tree fort and start punching the punching bag that's there, because that is a good outlet, and now I can, that's a safer way of manage, and better way to manage that emotion. I'm sure there's other nuances to that, right? But so what are some, just maybe a couple off the top of your head, like a way to manage emotion.
I'd like to talk about how parents can help their kids feel like emotions are normal and how
Right.
to like be comfortable with them. Because
Yeah.
if my family, we never talked about them. I mean, we didn't talk about it at all. And if someone came to me when I was really upset and wanted to help me work through my emotions, how much credibility would they have? There's no way I'd share my emotions with my family
Yeah.
members, right? I just wouldn't do it. And so my suggestion is if you want to help your kid with an emotional problem, 5 years from now, let's start right now and help them talk about and normalize emotions now. One thing I would suggest is really normalize talking about emotions, acknowledging their existence, using emotion words in everyday conversations. Like it's nothing for a family, someone to say, "Oh, you hungry?" Or it's nothing to say that. Like, why can't you say, "How you doing? You look like you're in a bad mood." Or
Right.
so and so's in a bad. So and so's really disappointed over here. Or you could talk about the child's emotions. You could talk about your emotions. My feelings are really hurt right now. I'm going to need a timeout. I'll talk to you later. I'm going to take a break. There's nothing wrong with a parent admitting that they're having emotions to your kids. That really normalizes the existence of emotions. It's also helpful to develop conversation around the characters in their stories. I mean, I love that movie. Name of that movie, Marty, you're gonna have to help me. Where the guy, it's a Disney movie where all the emotions are inside this girl's head.
Oh yeah. In Inside Out.
It's a great
Yes,
movie to
it is a
talk
great
about
movie.
emotions.
Yeah.
It's starting to normalize the existence of emotions. But my daughter used to read a little book series called Little Critter. I don't know if your kids ever read Little Critter.
No, but I know I'm
You
familiar
know,
with it.
they do a really nice job. He has one whole book on like being mad, little critters. And he had all kinds of little emotional situations. And you can read the book to your kid and talk about he's really mad. What do you think triggered him? You could like introduce words in conversation. It doesn't hurt to do it with strangers in the environment. You're in the car in the parking lot and some adult's acting the fool. You and your kid can just sit
Mm,
there inside the car and be like, "Oh, what do you think he's feeling? What do you
yeah.
think? What is he wanting? I can't tell what he's wanting from here." And just introduce curious conversation about the existence of emotions. I would also suggest talking to them about their emotions. And that's a little tactic. That's a tactic that will help to neutralize emotions. If you can find a way to name precisely what you're feeling and like label it and
Mm,
just be like, this is what I'm feeling. Um, it goes a long way to neutralize that feeling. Does it 100% of the time 100% neutralize? No. But a lot of the time, there's something really soothing and satisfying to say, exactly what you think and exactly what you feel about this thing, and it's just settling. Um, I think that would be a nice conversation to have with your kids and family, like all the time. How was school today? How did, oh, my teacher did this. Well, gosh, how did that make you feel? Like what was your feeling in reaction to that? And then if they don't know, you could help them out. Like, well, that might make me a little hurt. That might disappoint me a little. I might be a little outraged by that. Are you outraged or hurt or something different? You kind of
Sure.
give them clues, give them some multiple choice tests here, give them some options, and it will help them develop their emotional vocabulary. And that will help them in the future be able to pinpoint exactly what they're feeling and exactly what they're thinking, which will often just de escalate them.
Yeah. Yeah. I am not, there are a number of things within the school system that I'm not super stoked about that
Yeah.
they're doing. But one of the things that they are doing that I think is really great are those SEL, social emotional learning. And our kids, they're every day they are, hey, how are you coming in today? How are you feeling? And they kind of go, and then they have time that's set aside to talk about that social emotional learning skills, and it's my my 9-year-old, that's one of his favorite times of the day,
Mm.
which is really awesome. So, and when you began talking about the things that parents can do in with their kids, I heard you say, you know, a parent can talk about how they're feeling, but then there was
Mhm.
a modeling part in there with, I just need some time. I need to get away. So, in there, you're telling them, like, you're sharing your feelings, you're modeling that that's what you're doing, and then also
Mhm.
modeling the walking away like a tactic.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think I mean, that's the gold, right? I mean, instead of, so I'll give an example of me. At the beginning of my relationship with my wife, of course, we come in, man and woman. I'm the oldest, she's the youngest, from these big families. We manage life and emotions differently. In her family, and mine were very different in how we dealt with problems. And so um, she she would say, "Oh, you're mad." I'm like, "No, I'm not mad. I'm frustrated."
Mm.
Because if I said I was mad, then I felt like I lost in that
Mm.
situation. Like, I know I've got more control than I'm just frustrated. This is your issue, not mine. And but then I got to a spot where my wife is so good at this. She's just, I mean, she truly is a blessing, but she has allowed me to be vulnerable, to be emotional, to share that. So now I can, like, hey, what's going on? Yeah, I am pissed. Do you want to talk about it? No, I don't want to talk about it. I'm just ticked off, and then we can come back to it when it's better. But anyways, I brought that sort of baggage with me into our
Mm.
relationship, which I know is I have some very, let's just say, passionate kids, and so they will emote rather easily and quickly
Mhm.
towards anger a lot. But anyway, so um, that's just an example of what can happen when I tried to push down certain emotions. I didn't want to bring them to my wife, and um, but as soon as I began to be able to name not only the emotion but then also why, and take
Mm.
a step back from that and take a step out of the lizard portion of my brain into the logic portion of the brain, because I took a step back, then I could come and we could now handle the situation.
Solve the problem. Once your emotions are handled, you can
Ye-
solve the problem easier.
yeah. Yep.
Yeah. You brought up something really interesting that I think is an important thing for both children and adults to really be aware of. It's this anger business. Anger is a special kind of feeling. And if you don't mind, I'd like to share a little bit. I
Yeah,
sent you a
please.
link earlier. It's a link to something on the internet called the Anger Iceberg, and there's Anger Icebergs for adults, but I sent you a link for Anger Icebergs for children. And the website that it's on, the blog that it's on, is a therapist, and she has really wonderful instructional content for for a parent, how to walk their kid through using the Anger Iceberg handout.
Okay.
But let me explain why the anger iceberg is super important in conversations with your spouse or whatever, wherever you're feeling angry. Um, Anger, believe it or not, is not what you're feeling. And it's just so weird to think that, because most of us are just completely and totally in touch with the anger. And the reason I say that the anger is not really what you're feeling is that there are actually other emotions that are far more uncomfortable, like really uncomfortable. Just some examples: shame, humiliation,
Mm,
powerlessness, anxiety, fear. Like, ain't nobody wants to feel those things, Marty. Like, they're awful. No one wants to feel them. And there's a variety of others. But what happens is your brain's paying attention, and it's like, oh, you're feeling really humiliated right now. And you're inside, you're going, I don't want to feel this. I don't want to feel this. And your brain comes in, no problem, brother. I got you. I'm going to make sure you don't feel this. And so the brain creates this smoke screen of anger and just covers up the humiliation or whatever the uncomfortable feeling it is. So all that you really can access in that moment is the smoke. But the
mm,
fire keeps burning, right? The fire keeps burning. And so remember earlier when I said one of the strategies to neutralize emotional distress is to just be very clear, this is what I'm feeling right here about this thing, right? The clarity and the calling it out and the owning what you're feeling will often really neutralize the feelings. And that's why sometimes I'm sure you've had conversations in a peer support capacity where you're talking to someone and they walk away and they're like, oh, I feel so much better. And you're like, I didn't really do anything, right?
right.
And that I don't, have you had that experience, Marty?
Oh yeah. Yep.
And and it's because you handed them the microphone and they called out, this is what I'm feeling. This is what they're putting words to things that they normally don't put words to. And that can be super relieving, which is great, right? But the problem with anger is it's that the real thing that someone's really feeling is hidden by the anger. So if they keep talking about, like, for example, with your wife, I'm mad, I'm frustrated, I'm mad, I'm frustrated, I'm mad, I'm frustrated. Like, you're talking about the smoke, right? And until you talk about what's the smoke, it's kind of covered. Until you get in there and kind of clear the smoke out and talk about, I'm really hurt and sad about what you said. Until you get down to the
Mm,
fire, you don't get a chance to get relief. And so that's really a helpful thing to realize, both as a parent trying to coach a kid through anger management, and as a parent, an adult who has anger, like we all do, because we're wired for it. Like, so if you're having, or your kid's having anger, stop, step back. What am I really? I got it. I got the smoke. I'm detecting smoke. What's the fire? What's the real pain point here? And then if you can identify that, you're a long way to solving the problem, or at least having the problem clearly identified, right? Oh,
yeah.
someone said something that hurt me. Okay, then I need to go talk to them and to get that cleaned up, rather than just being mad and throwing things, and that doesn't clean anything up. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It sounds awful lot like in order to find that fire, you have to be a little bit vulnerable, and that's a word that we don't like to use very much.
Vulnerable. You think it's vulnerable to know what's going on inside you?
No, I think it's vulnerable to be able to tell my wife that something she said hurt.
Oh, okay.
Right. So if we get to that, I'm just being honest, and for those who are listening, right, that's going to
Yeah.
be, it's kind of a hard one to get through, to go, because we step in on the scene as men in these women's life, and we want to be. I mean, we still have that hero image, in all
Mm.
the stories that were brought up through. We watch Braveheart, and
Oh,
this
yeah.
guy who's this brave, valiant man who's coming in to save the day or rescue the
Hmm.
princess or whatever. And so to then say to my wife, who want to like project this macho, strong, and to a certain degree, we want to be that for our wives, but then to go to her and say, you hurt me, um, it just sounds like something that we don't want to say, but I know it's important. I'm not taking away from anything that you're saying. That's just something that's a struggle, right? To be
Yeah.
vulnerable.
Yeah. Yes. And that's a really short, I think I hear what you're saying, and I think you're not the only one, and I think you're doing a really great job of representing 90% of the people listening to this, right? Um, Short term, the next 5 minutes, I don't want to show any vulnerability. I'm not going to admit any weakness. Nothing hurts me. I'm a stone. And I would argue, as a woman, we're in it for the emotions, man. If you were truly a stone, I don't know that you'd be married. Like, I don't think the women are in it for rocks. We're in it for like the connection. And there's nothing more connecting than saying your truth or being willing to hear someone else's truth and y'all working through it together. That's super connecting. However, short term, I can see what you're saying, right? But
Yeah.
long term, I mean, if she doesn't know, sorry, my southern's coming out. If she doesn't know what's going on inside you, she's going to keep saying the wrong thing. She's going to keep
Yeah.
doing these things that hurt you. So 30 years from now, you'll be hurt and mad over the same things you're hurt and mad about now. It's That's a lot of unnecessary pain in the long term,
Right.
I
And
think.
right. And I mean, in to be, to not play the devil's advocate, but to, um, in truth, it takes a lot more courage to be vulnerable and to share those things. And then
Mhm.
it also I mean, it's a really good modeling and leadership role to come out and do that, to be aware, to be able to name it, to be able to dig deep inside there. I mean, that is takes some really strong awareness of yourself and ability to dig in there.
I think of it as really truth telling, but you're telling the truth not about situations, but about yourself.
Yeah,
Like,
sure.
when you said X, I felt Y,
Mm,
and I don't like that. I don't like when someone says something to me that's very easily seems like an attack. Or
yeah,
you can be very frank about what's going on, and that I don't know if that's vulnerable. You're just telling the truth. Like, when you said that, I felt this. I don't want that to keep happening.
yeah,
And then have a conversation about whatever is involved in that. Um, Maybe it doesn't have to be about revealing weakness. Maybe it can just be about revealing truth.
yeah. I love that. For sure. Yeah, I mean, I mean, you're just, flipping that script a little bit. And yeah, I agree. I believe you 100%. I think that but I think for some, and for me as well, that can be the hardest part of the truth is that, man, the truth really stings. And I don't like how it feels. I don't like the story necessarily that it's telling about me.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, anyways, that's getting a little bit into my psychology a bit.
It's interesting, though. I bet you're not the only one listening to this who thinks exactly the same way.
Yeah, I'm sure of it because I hear these stories in roundtable discussions, but I also hear them, one on one. Where I mean, that's the projection that I will get from a lot of people, and that's a projection that I give to a lot of people as well, at times. So yeah, I mean, it's there, and and that's why I think sometimes for men, anger is so easy to come by, or so maybe not so easy to come by, but the one that we're okay with because anger looks strong. It
Mm.
looks resilient. It looks, yeah, it just looks kind of macho, right? To flex and to yell and to get big. And I mean, that's bravado and just a right there in front of you. It's like a little bomb and you just drop it and everything is supposed to be fine, but there is a lot of shrapnel and casualties, right? With that. And then you're not getting to the heart of the matter, and it's going to always be that what's going to come back over and over and over again if we just meet it with anger, correct?
Well, I think if you think about lizard brain, it's fight or flight. Like
Yeah.
that's what lizards in charge of, fight or flight. And if you're puffing up and being the macho, like you're engaging fight and you're engaging threat and you're eliciting in the other person. You're actually threatening the other person with your anger. Not you,
Mm.
but people who, I mean, humans, we do this.
Yep.
And so what we're doing when we're being angry is we're actually just trying to provoke a fear response in the other people so that they will leave. They will leave us alone, right? Which is fine if you're in a parking lot somewhere and you got some jerk who's, whatever.
Yeah.
There's maybe time for that, right? But in your personal life, with your family, with your loved ones, do you want them to link you to threat response every time something gets real? That doesn't feel very emotionally safe, and it really erodes like the emotional attachment if you
Sure.
feel threatened for it being real or having something really real going down, and you're going to have to face anger and explosions and threats. I don't know. That's just my
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it would
biased
be,
therapy perspective.
no, no, I think that's great. It could, yeah, just to, go a little bit further in that, I mean, you're creating an anxiety and fear around those, and creating that, so as we're, talking about that cultural shift,
Yeah.
um, if that is your culture of, that's our culture now, we're instilling that fear and anxiety and that lizard brain response in our family. And so, kind of, yeah, I mean, it sounds fairly detrimental, honestly.
I remember in elementary school. This was back when the teachers had really big paddles, and it
Yeah.
was really cool to get into paddling. And we had some teachers that would just blow up and and they hurt. That is not a teacher any of us ever felt comfortable with. We were on edge, waiting, like, oh my God, what's he going to do? And I wouldn't go to one of those teachers, just teachers, and much less a family member. I wouldn't go to one of those teachers if I needed
Mm,
help. I had a
yeah.
teacher like that in, I think it was second grade. I had to go pee so bad, so bad. But this was Miss Jeffers. She was the paddler, and she would go off over anything. I sat there to the point where I just couldn't hold it anymore, and I just peed in my chair. And it was not because I didn't know how to raise my hand and ask to go to the bathroom, because Miss Jeffers was a threat. And she was super
Mm,
dangerous, and I was not going to provoke her. So I couldn't go get the help I needed for something as basic as biological function, right? And so I think just for my kid and grandchild, I want them to be able to come to no matter how screwed up the situation is, no matter how twisted and messed up it is, just let's bring it home and let's figure it out, right? Let's just try to figure it
yeah.
out. I don't want metaphorically my children or my grandchildren being so scared of my reactions because I'm just going to be blow up and be mad that they're going to do something like whatever the metaphorical equivalent of peeing in the middle of the classroom is. I don't know what that would be. But
Sure. Yeah.
you get, I mean, you want to be the safe one, I think,
Yeah.
is because there's enough danger out in the world. I mean, our children are getting shot at school. There's enough danger out there. It would be nice
Yeah.
for them to have a home base where they didn't feel threatened and anger and threats aren't what they're faced with, and the people who are supposed to be protecting and guiding them.
Right. And that's what I'm hearing is that, creating safety in the home so that they feel like they can share their emotions. And now we've created safety, we've created some modeling, we've created, conversations around emotions.
Mm-hmm.
We're beginning to name those emotions, and, um, yeah. So what
What's
else?
next?
What's next?
So I would suggest some de-escalation strategies. I have put in the links I sent you that if you wanted to post them with this video,
Yeah.
a link for grounding tactics for children. And if you don't if you don't post them, people can just Google those keywords, grounding techniques, children. And there's a variety of things. There's two different types of head games you can play that will really shut down the emotional flare, especially fight or flight. It just kind of shuts down the emotional cascade right off, and that's activating sensory processing in the brain. You start running sensory processing through your brain, and that will shut down the emotional processing. I'll tell you how to do that in a minute. And the other is running numerical or mathematical calculations through your brain, and that will also shut down the emotional cascade. So if someone's really sad and just sobbing, or they're really angry, or they're really just sullen, or they're really anything, they're really activated emotionally. Um, the sensory one is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's a classic strategy. It's been around forever. You'll find probably a million um, dings on Google for that. But it's where you really feel like you, with your fingertips, you really feel. So you activate your senses, your five senses: seeing, feeling, hearing, smelling, tasting. So you would really feel and really focus on it to the way more than you normally would, 100% of your attention on what you're feeling. And then you would feel five things. You would feel this, you'd feel the texture of the paper, you whatever is around the kid or you. And then you would do four of a different sense. So maybe you might
Mm.
look at something real close. You might smell something. If you were in the kitchen, you might open the spice jars and smell four spices. Um, and then you would do three of a different sense, two of a different sense, one of a different sense, a different sensory model. This one has so much flexibility. Like if you're not in a place where there's food or anything to smell, you can just feel the seam on your shirt. Or if you're a firefighter out on a call, you could feel that reflective tape on your bunker gear. Or you can try to feel where the seam is. Where is the seam on this? Can I feel that with my fingertip? Like anything where you're forcing your brain to focus on any of your five senses, that will really quickly shut down your emotional cascade. One way to really like to take that to the next level, to level that up, is there's a reflex, and honestly, I don't remember what it's called, but there's a reflex where when you go into cold water, it
Mm.
causes this hyper alertness in the brain. I think it's a survival reflex. So if you're unconscious or something and you hit water, it really wakes you up and increases your chance of survival. So if someone's really losing it, if your kid's spinning out, if you're spinning out about your kid and you're just like, I got to calm down here, you can just go turn on the cold water and splash your face, or run your hands or your wrists under the water so that it triggers that cold water alertness. And when that gets triggered, it de-escalates the emotions. Some people will run a little bowl of water, put a couple ice cubes in it, stick your hand in it, or splash it on your face. I mean, there's so many ways to activate your sensory processing brain parts that, I mean, you could just be creative, right? I will say, if you use ice, don't give yourself frostbite. That's crazy. Like, don't go too far on that. But
Right.
you can use your senses. Um, Another tactic is the numbers. This one's really quick. If you've got a really young child, you might have them count things if they don't know how to do math yet. Count the number of teddy bears on the bed. You know, count the number of flowers in this bouquet, or count, I don't know. There's so many things you can count. Count the number of windows on the wall. Count the cars in the parking lot here. And that will help your brain downshift out of the emotional state and it downshifts lizard brain is what it does, and it puts logic brain up on top into dominant position again. If you're someone who has mathematical abilities, you can just do math in your head. 112 plus 25, 25 times 5, 25 minus 5, 25 plus 5 minus 5 times 2. Like, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter what the math is. You just have to be the math calculation part of your brain has to be sincerely trying. and it just shuts off the emotion of your brain. Which is really helpful when you feel like you're out of control, and like that thing you were talking about when you're feeling mad. Do I go punch the bag or do I throw something? Or you could just do a times table, like do the seven
Right.
time. I do the seven times table, and do it all the way out to 20, 20 times seven, 21 times seven, and that will just downshift the emotional reactivity.
Yeah, and I heard you. I've seen it in action during one of our debriefings that you ran, where
Mm-hmm.
somebody was sharing, and their emotions I want to say, got the better of them. They weren't able to, they were, starting to cry, and they just couldn't get the words out, or it was broken through that, and you just, hey, what's 2 plus 2? What's 4 plus 4? What's 8 plus 8? What's 16 plus
Mm-hmm.
16? And you did that, and you saw the person just come down,
Right,
and
step by
then
step. Mm-hmm.
yeah, and then you're, hey, how are you doing? And then just went a little bit further until they were able to now do that. And you had said something, and that sticks with me, is, that the emotions and then the sensory and numerical part run on the same train track, and you can't have
Mm-hmm.
two trains on the same track. And
Yeah.
for me, that was a very good picture. So
Oh,
that,
okay, yeah.
and so now, I mean, I've brought that up a countless number of times since then, and that was, I think only it was just over a year ago, and um, yeah, so just for those listeners, that emotions, the numerics, and sensory processing are all on the same train track. So,
Yeah.
if those emotions are on that train track and you need to get control of it, be a great conductor, and put it, get something else on that track.
Yeah, just force numbers through down the train track, and it will knock the emotion cars off the track, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, definitely. Um, and so I think that um,
I have another
um,
thing I'd like to
yeah,
bring up.
yeah, please.
Most of the time, people don't know exactly what they're feeling, right? Especially those of us who come from families and cultures and genders where it's not cool to know what you're feeling. You just know you feel mad. That's what you're allowed to know, right?
Yeah.
Um, Sometimes people need help, and especially kids. Kids need help, and there's lots and lots of clues, right? And so if you can get a label or get someone to say out their mouth any of the clues, it'll help them focus in on what's going on inside them. That would be what they're feeling. If they can find the feeling, great. If they can find anger, do the anger iceberg. Oh, I didn't talk about the anger iceberg is you'll. Should I go into the anger iceberg? I kind of went over the anger iceberg concept earlier.
Yeah, a little bit. It would, yeah, I mean,
Let me
just,
let me go over sidebar.
yeah, a little brief sidebar here.
Remember how I said that smoke screen anger is the smoke around the real fire? The fire is a
Yes.
really painful emotion that you don't want to feel, and the smoke is what your brain's helping you out. It's going to cover it all up with that anger smoke. That's one metaphor. Another metaphor is, how icebergs, they say that just a little bit, the top of it sticks out of the water, but there's a lot more ice underneath the water. Um, So if you're using that metaphor for anger, the little tiny piece you see at the top is the anger. Super obvious. It's above the water. Everyone can see it. But down under the water, there's all this other emotion that could be driving the emotion on top. And until you get all that stuff under the water cleaned out, that little thing on top is going to stay there, right?
Yeah.
And so if you guys go to Anger Iceberg handout, right? There's Anger Iceberg, tons of different kinds for adults, but there's a really cute one for kids, which is
Awesome.
you want to check the Anger Iceberg for kids. And so, what was I doing? I feel like I was. Oh, you're looking for clues, right? So you got the anger, the feelings. Excuse me. You've got the thoughts that they're thinking. You've got the facial expression clues. You've got body sensations. So facial expressions, like my ex-husband used to, he was a police officer, and he would, he's a rock, like he was a rock, but you could tell because he would, I can't even do it. He would clench his jaw, and I could see the muscle move, and I was like, ooh, he's mad about something over there.
Right.
But your kids will probably have bodily Some people get
Mm.
that red flush when they get rattled, whatever their body clues are. Sometimes people have body sensations that, like, it's like your kid's coming at you with, I got a stomach ache, I don't want to go to school. Okay. Oftentimes stomach ache is a sign of anxiety, or distress, stress of some kind. Or I see a lot of firefighters who have the chest, like that when something starts going down, the discomfort in the chest is the feeling. And barring a cardiac condition, if it's a cardiac condition, that's one thing. But a lot of the time it's emotion, and we can feel it in our chest.
Yeah.
Or, oh, you've heard that saying, he was heartbroken. Nothing happened in his heart. Nothing happened. There's no cardiac thing going on. He's having grief because got broken up with, like he's brokenhearted. Or a frog, like I feel like my heart leapt into my throat. You've probably heard that saying.
Yeah.
Nothing's happening with your throat. You're just feeling emotions right there. So if your kid's like, my throat's tight, or my chest hurts, or my stomach hurts, those are clues you can use to kind of launch the conversation. So I would suggest, when your kid's coming home and you can tell if something's going on, or maybe it's behavioral, maybe he's got his arms crossed, he's got the facial expression that he's all puffed up and his arms are crossed,
Yeah.
and you know something's happening there. And then you could just point out what you're observing, and then start asking around that. Wow, I see that your arms are crossed and your face is really red. Are you feeling blah blah blah? What's going on? What's happening? And it just, by pointing out the indicators that there's something happening, it helps people kind of focus their attention inward into what's happening. And if you can get them to talk about what's happening with specifically, it helps de-escalate it, and it helps uncover, like, the problem that needs.
Yeah.
So that's another thing, like really hone in as a parent on the clues, and call them out, and introduce and be curious about them. I feel like various grounding. We talked about grounding and de-escalation. I think it's helpful to remember that when lizard brain has hold of the steering wheel and it's driving the car, it's really hard for logic brain. It's hard to be logical, like, because lizard's dominant, like lizard's survival related, right? So it's super dominant. The more riled up you are and emotional, the less logical you're going to be. That's just how it is, right? So if you're riled up and emotional, you want to de-escalate the emotions, stunt them off, vent them off, get them out, use your tools and tactics to get rid of them. And the more you get them out of your system, the more logic. It's like here's emotion, here's logic, right? If emotion is high, logic is going to be low. And the more you lower lizard brain, logic brain will naturally float higher.
Mm.
So whatever problem you have to solve, whatever it is, you really want logic brain solving the problem, because lizards really good at bear attacks, mountain lion attacks. It's really good for survival. Fight in a fire, lizards probably pretty good at that. But you guys probably do a lot of training to make sure that logic dominates lizard in a life and death situation in your fire service training. But the rest of us who don't have that, like, we have to dump off the emotions to get logic dominant again. That's something to remember, and maybe something to teach the kids, that if we want to solve the problem, we got to handle the emotion first. And then when that's emotions down, our logic brain is back in charge, and we can figure out a solution together. And
Yeah.
I think that will be helpful.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. So, yeah. And, you were talking about, firefighters being good at, or we, practice that. I think, what comes to mind is that competency breeds confidence. And then with that confidence, so that competency being, hey, we've trained it, we've done it. So that's the thing that first comes to mind. Cause yeah, when we get those tones that go off, um, we get that spike in our
Yeah.
heart rate. We start, that lizard brain is awakened, and we can
Mm-hmm.
feel it.
Yeah.
And then, if it's just a normal, 80% call, then that just shuts down really quick. But if we get that, 5, 10, 2% call, we stay up there, and it's even higher now, right?
Mm.
Because about to do something that we don't do outside of our training very often. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
imperative that we can then, even when we are at those higher levels of stress, that we can access or on autopilot somewhat do those skills. So, if what, and so the same can be true when we're talking about emotional resiliency, or, talking about our emotions, and getting to that logic part of our brain is, hey, we've practiced this, we've talked about
Yeah.
it, we've done it. I know how to do this. I'm in the moment right now. I'm feeling all of these things. I'm not sure how to name it yet, but I have a process
Yeah.
to begin there.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good link, right? Because you're right. Like repetition breeds confidence, breeds competence,
Yes.
or repetition breeds
Competence.
competence, which
Yes.
breeds confidence. And wouldn't it be nice for yourself and your kids if you guys could practice this stuff enough and you're on the low stakes side of life so that when they're facing something big in their teenage years and it's high stakes, when it's time to say no to your peers, right? When it's time
Yeah.
to do the smart thing and it's hard, they've faced down those feelings so many times that it's really not even hard for them.
Right. And these things that we've been talking about, and you're educating us on, these are developing resiliency skills,
Totally.
right?
Yeah,
In
resiliency is shock absorbers, right? Like no matter what pothole you run over, no matter what terrible thing comes at you, you can bounce back. And if you have emotional skills and abilities, you can bounce back even when the emotions are terrible. You can bounce back because you've got all these skills you've been working on building up. It's almost like going to the gym, Marty. I don't know if I've used this metaphor already,
Yeah.
but you go to the gym, you do these stupid I'm not a gym person. You can tell my attitude. You're just lifting weights over and over, and it's like, why am I doing this, right? But then if I need to lift the car off my grandbaby, maybe I can do that, right? Like I've got some muscles now that I've built up from this stupid repetition that I can actually use in my day-to-day life. Same thing with emotional management. You do these little exercises, you practice, you talk about it, you get used to it. You're building emotional muscle memory, and
Yeah.
that's your resiliency. You can use that when times are tough.
Right. So really, what we've done here, um, so far today, is we've gotten in the emotional gym, the emotional resiliency gym, and
Mm-hmm.
getting, and we've got a trainer, you, with us, that's saying, hey, what is your goal? Okay, the goal is to, be able to lift this in my life. And now we're talking emotions. We're dealing with those emotions. Okay, well, here are some lifts that you can do. And some of those things that you're talking about, normalizing it, talking about it, naming it, uh, parents modeling it, changing that culture, then the de-escalation, that sensory, numerical, getting that on the train track instead of the
Yeah.
emotions, and starting to de-escalate that, and starting to push down that lizard brain and let the logic brain, which makes us such an amazing species, bring that to the forefront. And then, we've talked about emotional management, and we've talked about Anger Iceberg. Yeah, I mean, I think that's, what people were wanting. What does that look like to get in those reps? Is
I know you're summarizing, and I hope you can give me 5 more minutes because while you were
Oh yeah,
summarizing, I realized, oh my God, I left out two things that he was asking for.
no, no, I'm just trying to. This helps me to keep up speed myself and my brain, here, so, and
I
everybody
got
else
some
as well.
topics, Marty.
Yes, please.
I'm sure you guys have been taught about. I think your county does air management. Sorry, it doesn't matter. Breathing. You guys box breathing is what you guys are taught for air management. Yeah,
Yes, we do different types
different
of
things. Yeah.
breathing. Yes.
So breath management, very basic, simple, does not have to be fancy pants. if you can just breathe, because most people, when they get anxious or angry, they either stop breathing, they'll hold their breath, and there's no air coming in, or they'll breathe super shallow, like lungs are like way down into your stomach, right? But they'll breathe up in the tippy top part of their, they'll just sip air rather than breathing air, and that
Yes.
creates a hypoxic or an under-oxygenated bloodstream, which changes your entire biochemistry, which sets off all this stuff, which makes it, your brain's like, oh my God, I'm suffocating. Oh, my life isn't it. So not only are you facing the stressor that's causing all your emotion, and your brain is freaking out about that, but now your brain is thinking it's dying because it's under oxygenated, and it's
Yes.
feeling, perceiving another threat to life. So you got a double decker threat to life going on. And it's so easy to control one of them, which is the breathing. You just oxygenate. So whenever you're under any type of stress, or whenever you're going into a situation like a job interview or a fire or whatever you're facing, keep breathing. Keep an eye on, keep the air coming in and out, and that will, at minimum, it will keep you from locking up the air situation and causing things to be worse. And your kid, like, so if you have a kid who's really mad about something, or hurt or sad, and they're just losing it. They're spilling it. There's emotion everywhere. Okay, let's just take a minute. What we're going to do is we're just going to take a minute. We'll talk about it later. We're going to breathe right now. So let's breathe. I'll count it for you. So make it, breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. And out, 2, 3, 4. Now sit there. Do nothing. 4 and in. You just do the box. In 4, hold 4, out 4, nothing 4. In 4, hold 4, out 4, nothing 4. And you can help your kid oxygenate themselves back to a calmer state. And it makes the talking about stuff later easier.
Mm.
Um, that was an important one. I'm sorry I left that out. There's another one that's
No.
really interesting. It's all about body position. It's pure biology. You'll have to, excuse me, I'm going to use a metaphor. So think about a garden hose, right? And in this garden hose, in this story, the garden hose is my emotional system, right? Full of emotion. The water is the emotion coming through, right? And so if water is coming through I got the weirdest hoses at my house, right? So if I got a hose and I got water coming through my line and I put a kink in the line, what does that do? It puts a lot of pressure on your line. If you have any weak
Mm.
spots, it's going to blow water, water. What happens at my house is over at the spigot, there's water against the side of the house. It's a train wreck. So in this analogy, if you're having emotional water coming through your emotional system, your water hose, the last thing you want to do is kink the water hose and keep it from flowing, because that will put pressure on your emotional system. Everything seems harder. And then if there's any weakness in your system from various reasons that happen, you're going to start squirting out emotions in places you don't want emotions. You're going to yell and say things you don't want to say. You're going to act in ways that aren't in your or your family's best interest. Like, it's just going to come leaking out, right? So
Yeah.
here's how you keep the line open. When you're emotional, any type of emotion, you want to keep your chin up. You know, the British, they have that saying, chin up. I think they're
Yeah.
onto something there. If your chin is up, and if you draw an imaginary line from your nose to the wall out in front of you, you want to keep your eyes above that imaginary line and your chin up. Okay. And what people will do, that will let the emotions flow through faster. And what they'll want to do is when their face starts getting wet, when the tears start coming, they're going to be wanting to touch it, to wipe it. They want to hide. People, when there's emotions, want to cover, and they'll often even cover and completely go over and like completely cover.
Yes.
That is literally kinking the line. I mean, so if you or your kid is having any emotion and you're in a position, it's not like don't do this when it's a bad time to do it, but most of the time it's not a bad time to do this. Um, Chin up, eyes up, keep your eyes open. If you close them, it's going to escalate the emotions and put pressure on your system. Keep your hands away from your face, and if you have to, sit on your hands. Like, sit on them. Do not put them
Mm.
near your face. Your face will not melt off if it gets a little wet from tears, right? And what will happen is the wave, it's like a wave at the beach. The wave will hit, the emotion will leave, It'll you out and then it'll be done. The wave will be over. Then you'll feel back closer to normal, right?
Yeah.
So that's really helpful because we are wired for these feelings, and if they're hitting us hard, just pretending they're not there is not then they're not there. It's not going to work. And if you could just find a way to let them out by the train track, by the sensory thing, by the just feeling them and letting them go, then they'll be gone. Um, these kinds of things make you more competent emotionally, and then that will make you more confident emotionally, and then that will make your lizard brain better able to function to solve whatever problem you're facing.
Wow. That's awesome. I
Mm-hmm.
appreciate that. And I came across when I was looking at, after we were done talking, I was looking, oh man, what about these resiliency skills? Because I was under the impression that to gain resiliency, you had to go through something. And, and so I looked at, I forgot where I got this stuff, indeed.com.
Oh,
I don't think it's anyways, there was somebody that wrote in there talking about a natural resiliency, just, something that some people are born with higher resiliency factors, maybe.
mm,
Um, and yeah, I don't know. Adaptive meaning, something you have to go like a resiliency that comes through going through something, and then restored being what you're talking about, like developing those skills. And they had brought up stuff like self-confidence and optimism and responsibility and patience, self-awareness as being some skills that you'd want to develop in order to gain resiliency.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that there's a lot of stuff out there, yeah, to go along with what you're talking about. I mean, I it just seems like there's a lot of information out there for people who want to get better. And I'm glad that you are, one of those resources for us that we can go to and gain some wisdom and some perspective, to help us move forward through, this. This is a really, really great life. It's beautiful and full of awesome stuff, but it is not always pretty. It's
No,
not
yeah, life
always,
can be hard.
yeah, it's not always roses and puppy dog tails or puppy dog farts or whatever, you want to, whatever people
Unicorn
want.
parts.
Yeah. Unicorn farts. Yeah, maybe that's what it is. But, yeah. So, yeah, I appreciate you coming on here. Is there anything else that you think that we'd be, um, missing out or remiss for not bringing up?
Let me look at my to-do list. Then.
Yeah, please do.
Anger Iceberg. Okay. I guess I think we covered it. I don't know how much. I don't think we went too much into self coaching. Have we done self coaching?
Um, I
I think
don't,
we did
I don't think
today.
we hit on that today. No.
So remember when you're stressed out, different things are affected. Your facial expression, your behaviors, your thoughts, your feelings. There's all kinds of components to being distressed. And one thing that can happen is your lizard brain starts interfering with logical thinking and causes you to think things that just aren't true, right? Just aren't true. But we believe them because lizards in charge. We'll believe anything lizard says. It's kind of funny, but whatever. Um, so some of the things we tend to think is I'm all alone. Like
Mm,
I'm in this all by myself, right? I can't handle this as one. I'm in it by myself as one. I'm unlovable as one. Um, I'm blanking right now, but there's 30 or 40 of that in traumatic or troubling situations. I'm worthless. I'm unacceptable. I'm all kinds of negative things you don't want anybody thinking, especially your kids, right?
yeah.
Um, lizard brain will go right there. I mean, lizard it just goes there. And so self-coaching, if you're talking your kid through, like if your kid's emotionally skewing and it's just emotionally discerning, get the chin up, get the eyes up, get the hands away from the face, right? And throw self-coaching at them. You're not alone. We're in this together. Like whatever it is, we can figure it out. This is People get through whatever it is you're bringing. You're bringing nothing new to the table. Humans deal with this. Humans go through this. If other people can survive it, we can too. I've been around longer than you have. I can think of more ideas than you can, and I'll give them to you. Like, I don't care. Like, whatever you need to say to this kid to let them know they're acceptable, their problems are acceptable, they're lovable, they're not alone, they got a family at their back. Like, you know, they're going to be okay,
Yeah.
because of all those things. If you can self-coach those, they're not going to hear it or pick it up at first. But if ever, when they're 5, they're saying this, they're 7, 9, 12, 13, if they're hearing this their whole lives, that's the soundtrack that will be in their head when they're facing stress
Mm.
farther in life. And so you can start building out their resiliency or their coping soundtrack by saying these things to them over and over again, especially when they're distressed.
Yeah. Yeah. And so emotions first, then problem second.
Excuse me, Marty, I apologize.
No, no worries. I had seen that in your notes, and we've talked about that. Handle the emotional part first, and then handle the problem. Um, and just a reminder that that lizard brain is important. It's there for a reason, right? When there is a threat, that's what it's
Mm-hmm.
for. It's to keep us safe. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes our brain is trying to keep us safe in times when we don't, when we're safe already, and
Yeah,
we just
it's
need
not
to.
the threat that our lizard's telling us it is.
Right. Yeah. There's not quite that threat. So we need to be able to develop these skills so we can access that logic part of the brain when it's time for logic to be present and allow that lizard brain to work when it's supposed to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people who've had brain injuries to that part of the brain, they don't live very long, not because the injury kills them, because they're just not aware of threat. They're not aware of risk. They just don't
Mm,
clock it. And so
yeah.
they'll end up putting themselves in situations that are highly dangerous. And their life expectancy, when that part of the brain, the fight or flight part of the brain is injured, life expectancy is poorer. So it's not our enemy. Thank God for it, really. Thank God it's
Yeah.
there. But we don't want it running the show. It's the same. We don't want the military running our daily lives, right? That starts to look like a life, a culture we don't want to be in. Same thing. We don't want this kind of military, I'm going to save you part running day to day life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Cheryl.
You're welcome.
I appreciate you. And this was really awesome. And yeah, I look forward to the next time,
Same here, Marty.
which means you're on the hook because I said it.
You said it. I'm okay.
Uh,
Take
all
care,
right.
Marty.
You
Bye
too.
bye.
Bye.